All right, we can go ahead and get started. So we're live on Facebook streaming the panel now. But I'd like to say good afternoon to our audience and all of the people joining us. Thank you to the Texas Housers staff for producing this event, so Michael Deepland and our government relations consultant, Nate Walker, for helping to make this happen. And thank you to our panelists, Representative John Rosenthal, Senator Sarah Eckhart, and Sandy Rollins of the Texas Tenants Union. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christina Rosales, and I'm Deputy Director of Texas Housers. We're a statewide housing advocacy organization. We've been around for more than 30 years. And for those 30 years, every legislative session, we've been working alongside Sandy Rollins, advocating for low-income renters, low-income homeowners, renters' rights, and just trying to make sure that Texas is providing decent, safe, affordable housing for Texans in the state. This legislative session was a doozy for everybody. It attracted national attention, moments of some protest, and there were some pretty ugly moments that no one is denying that happened under the Pink Dome. But there are reasons to highlight some good things, and maybe it's the naivete of an idealist trying to work for a better world, but I do think that there were important conversations started about renters' rights, especially given that we are in the middle of a pandemic that totally changed everything we thought was possible. We have a national eviction moratorium, more rental relief and assistance for people than we've ever seen before. And we are having real conversations about eviction diversion, building renter power, ensuring that they have the right protections. And that was sort of the backdrop for this legislative session. So among all the things happening, we're focusing on that today for this panel. So I would like each of you to talk about some of the main goals related to housing, on homelessness solutions, that each of you had, and I will start with Senator Eckhart.
Well, first off, I do want to highlight something that Representative Rosenthal and I worked on together, which is really important, which is to treat renters with the dignity and the respect under contract that any contractor would expect. We had a bill to prevent property owners from raising rents mid-lease. And it's amazing to think that, if you're in contract with somebody, that they could change the terms of the contract right in the middle of the lease. And yet that's exactly what occurs under state law. So Representative Rosenthal and I had a bill to prevent that for those who are most housing cost burdened, the folks who are most vulnerable, for which this loophole exists. We didn't get it over the finish line, but we're going to keep working it. Because of course, everyone should be treated with the same kind of dignity under lease, which is the contract. No one should be able to have a contract pulled out from under them, mostly because they're poor. So we'll keep working on that. We've got a long way to go in the state of Texas. It's a property rights state, as we've often heard, and I have often translated that to mean if you have the money to defend your property right, it's a property rights state. But if you don't, it's very, very difficult to maintain your property rights, including your lease rights. So we'll keep working on that. Our state doesn't contribute a lot financially toward affordable housing. We're seeing most of the heavy investment coming at the local level and at the federal level. And so I look forward to continuing to work with Representative Rosenthal, Senator West, Representative Rodriguez, some of our leaders really, in the efforts to have land banks, for instance, so that nonprofit can own the dirt and the individual who may be low income can own the improvement and build equity in that improvement, whether it's a single family house or whether it's a cooperative multifamily. So there's lots of good work on the horizon for us to do, and I'm very excited to do it with y'all.
Representative Rosenthal, your name was brought up, so I'll hand it to you next. What were some of your priorities this session?
Well, first, thanks for having me. And Christina, thanks for all that you do, and especially the awesome testimony that you gave on a number of bills that I was watching. Thanks for all your advocacy in the Capitol. And thanks also to Senator Eckhart. I sure hope that she's such a pleasure to work with. I sure hope that there's more opportunity for us to work together. So on top of the basic decency, you know, that it seems like powers that be, wealthy folks want to dehumanize and resist attempts at just basic human decency in so many areas. Affordable housing is one of those areas. I was also pushing to expand affordable housing because so many folks, even if they're employed, can't afford to live in the city that they work in. In Austin, it's a particular problem, but in Houston too, and all of our major metropolitan areas have these issues. And if you're employed full-time at $15 an hour, even if that was the minimum wage, which it's not, you know, that's roughly $30,000 a year. For us, that's less than half of the area median income. And so there's just no housing for people who only make even $15 an hour. So to me, it's a complex problem with a lot of layers to it. It's wages, it's the cost and availability of affordable living spaces. And even if it's not for people, whether it's for people who have government assistance or not, we need to expand this availability because it adds to a larger overall problem. So to me, the way to address this is sort of on all fronts as much as we can. I wish we could have gotten farther during the session, but definitely here to continue working on that.
Yeah. Sandy is very familiar with the "we'll get them next session" mantra. So Sandy, talk about some of your main goals from this past session.
Well, the pandemic, I think, brought housing insecurity and eviction to the forefront in a way that it hasn't been probably ever since I've been doing this work. And so we were hopeful that it would produce some more fairness and to in tenant landlord law, which is very landlord friendly in the state of Texas. There were 56 bills introduced that made it into the property interest landlord tenant category. That's more than usually gets filed in that category. And some of the bills that have been on our list of legislative reforms for decades actually had bills attached to them. So key one was the opportunity or right to cure a default in an eviction. Almost every state in this country provides tenants with an opportunity to cure a default. In Texas, a tenant, the law says you can get a 3-day notice to vacate unless you sign away your right to proper notice in a lease, and then it's a 24-hour notice. And that's what almost everybody gets, because the standardized leases say you get a 24-hour notice to vacate. It's not even 24 hours to pay rent or move, it's just 24 hours to move. And then the landlord can file for eviction with the Justice of the Peace Court. So in contrast, the state of Mississippi, prior to the pandemic, post-pandemic, during pandemic, it's not a pandemic-related law, has an opportunity to cure a default where the tenant, if they go to court and pay what they owe anytime prior to the judgment, they get to retain their housing. I mean, that's good public policy. I mean, making it easy to make people homeless is not good public policy. So there were bills filed on opportunity to cure. They didn't get hearings. The other one is dealing with the sealing or expungement of eviction records. And this has been introduced in the past. And it got farther along this time after the bill was amended to limit it to the pandemic, evictions filed during the pandemic. But it didn't cross the finish line. It didn't get a hearing in the Senate. I don't even think it got assigned to a committee in the Senate. And so, you know, the filing of an eviction record in and of itself is a public record, and it follows people and it harms people and it causes people to be rejected from housing. You know, too many people that are living in motels and hotels or doubled up because they can't get a lease in their name because of an eviction on their record. And so, that criminals can get a criminal record expunged. It doesn't seem like too much to ask for a civil eviction record to be sealed so that they're not permanently harmed or harmed over the long term. And so, those were two of the main ones that I thought might have a chance because of the pandemic. And again, try again. There is a long list, and including bills that make it remove obstacles to getting housing and staying housed. And I know that both Representative Rosenthal and Senator Eckhart, worked on those. And again, we just have to keep up the fight.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought those two bills up, Sandy, because the first one about, or the second one about eviction record sealing, theoretically, that's already happening with the Texas eviction diversion program that has started during the pandemic. So having it in a statute would have made it much stronger and would have kind of paved the way for future advocacy to make it just a long-term thing that tenants can count on. And so bringing up the smart public policy, I just appreciate that, because we're not talking, eventually, yes, it would be great to make this a more renter-friendly state, but what we're talking about is getting Texas just up to the norm. And that's kind of what we're working for. But I think moving forward, it seems like we have a lot of work to do just that, and then a lot more work to get more of that, very rich renters' rights issues in the conversation and passed. And it starts with building, champions like Representative Rosenthal and Senator Eckhart. So I want to talk to you, Sandy, about your experience. You've been doing this a long time, and you've seen some sessions where things went better, some sessions where things didn't go well. Can you talk about just how this session compared to previous ones?
Sure. Well, our organization started back in 1979 around lobbying to get a repair law on the books. And I wasn't there for that session. Came soon thereafter, but the 79 session, there was a member of the East Dallas Tenants Alliance, which was one of the founding groups of the Texas Tenants Union, along with groups in Fort Worth and Austin. But it was a member of the East Dallas Tenants Alliance that had a case that went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court and got a favorable decision that the landlords do have a duty to repair. So the 79 session was to get that case law onto the books, and that happened. So subsequent sessions, we've had a legislative agenda, and it's based on the issues that tenants bring us day in, day out, year in, year out, and based on what we know, how other states and localities deal with housing. And so, we've had this long list, and some sessions we're able to check something off, and some sessions we're adding things because new abusive practices have emerged, and we've got to try to, find a law to address that issue. And so in the past, we've prior to the session, set up meetings with legislators and tenants who live in those districts, shop our list, let tenants tell, the stories and how they've been impacted and why we need a new law, pick a bill, any bill, and sometimes, get things introduced in that manner. And if we get a bill introduced, then we're committed to showing up for the hearing if that's desired. And on occasion, when we've been able to get agreement with the Texas Apartment Association, we've been told, we don't need a bunch of people here, just show up and express support and be there for questions and move on. But of course, there's a lot of issues where we can't get agreement with the Apartment Association. And I don't know how long it will take to win them over on our agenda, but my guess is that there's always going to be some differences on some of these issues. In a non-pandemic year, getting people to Austin can be challenging. You get relatively short notice of when a bill's going to be heard. We'll drive down, drive back all on the same day. You got to find people who can be in Austin at 10 a.m. Or upon adjournment, and the hearing might not come until 6 p.m. or later, and then we have to drive back. And so, that precludes a lot of working people that have children, people with disabilities that just can't handle a day that long, or the walking that it takes to get through the Capitol to the hearing rooms even. But we've done that in the past. Whoever's available, let's go and let's do that. And but again, that's a challenge. So this session, it was made easier in some ways by having, some committees were allowing Zoom hearings, not all, but we were able to get some tenant testimony via Zoom when they wouldn't have been able to go otherwise. And then once we figured out that people could submit public comments also online, we tried to use that a little bit more. And so that was easier a way to be able to involve tenants who don't live in Austin and who otherwise would not be able to participate. In some ways, though, this session was harder. Our workload is always heavy. And when the pandemic hit, it got even worse. And then when the February storm hit, it went off the rails. And so at times when we would have liked to have been able to focus more on the legislative session, we were just, stretched extremely thin. And so really grateful that Texas Housers is there on the ground and able to pay attention to this stuff, because it's really, really hard to do everything that needs to be done and, use the limited opportunity once every 2 years to, try to engage and get these bills through.
Yeah, and I will pause here and just say something really quick and maybe embarrass Sandy for a second, but I used to be a reporter at the Dallas Morning News and met Sandy while I was reporting on some housing issues. And I remember meeting with Sandy in her office, and Sandy is the person who may have not meant to, but convinced me to go to social work school and care about policy and social justice issues. So I, not only do I owe that to Sandy, but I also during the legislative session, Sandy is a great partner, and Texas Tenants Union is a great partner in all of this. So
thanks, Christina. Journalists are important too. If anybody out there is listening, I think it's essential to democracy and into these issues.
Absolutely, but my heart was swayed another way. So I'd like to move on to Senator Eckhart. You represent Bastrop and Travis counties. You're kind of a lifelong Central Texan, and so in Austin, housing and homelessness issues have been in the news a lot. And how have you seen the Texas Legislature address this? How can the Texas Legislature do better in the short term and the long term? Well, that question maybe was a little too much. We've lost Senator Eckhart. She will come, I'm sure she will come back, but I will maybe move to Representative Rosenthal just in the interest of time. Okay, so Representative Rosenthal, Houston is one of the most diverse cities in America and also among the most segregated cities in America. Do you see this as an issue that the Texas Legislature can address, and how?
Well, it would be so easy if I could just say, no, it's not an issue for the legislature, but it is. It's something we can definitely do something about. And well, I wish we could. Let's say it's within the realm of possibility if there's a will to do this. So, I mean, there are legislative solutions. I just want to add a little bit of background to this to say that before moving to Texas, my family lived in integrated areas. My father was a lifelong university professor. And so we lived in academic environments, which are naturally very integrated with people of other walks and other countries and a very international community. So we moved to Austin from Urbana, Illinois in 1979. And at the time, I was going to a 50-50 high school. So the area that we lived in Illinois was very integrated. We landed in Southwest Austin. We moved into a house in Rollingwood, which was not integrated at all. And the school that I went to as a sophomore in high school, not integrated at all. They're really, and I don't know if segregated is what happened there, but certainly in Houston, we see this and it alarms me. It makes me very uncomfortable to be in segregated spaces. I much prefer integrated society where, you know, you can exchange ideas and cultures. But there's things that happen, you know, so we have older neighborhoods get rebuilt. It ends up gentrifying because property values go up and people can't afford taxes in houses that their families lived in for generations. So, I mean, we could grandfather those households so that they don't have to pay the higher tax rates. There's things about home ownership incentive programs that I like to work with. We don't have many of those like Senator Eckhart had mentioned from the state, but there's local stuff happening both in our city, in Houston and in Harris County. There's HUD initiatives that bring millions of dollars to Texas to help folks into home ownership, and I think that would be helpful. And also, you know, wages. If people are making better money, they have more mobility. They have more ability to join these areas. So the area I live in is actually a very good model of this. There's integration. It's one of the things I find attractive about my part of Houston. It's a very diverse and integrated society. Like our public school, Cypher Independent School District, 115,000 students, something like that, and it's really a very balanced mix. So if we can promote these housing models to create affordable or more affordable housing, have the school districts be inviting, you know, grandfather our neighborhoods so that folks don't get gentrified out of their long-term family homes, but especially the housing assistance and the wage assistance, so that I feel like if people are earning a decent wage and can afford a space to live, you know, the cost of housing has risen so much higher than our wages, which have been stagnated for, you know, so many years, more than a decade, probably close to 20 years. I think that those are things that we can address legislatively. There has to be a will, though, and progressive policy like that was not the flavor of the day in this last session. So the people have to get behind these movements and let their elected representatives know that that's what we want. It creates wealth. It moves from the bottom up. It creates safer neighborhoods to have integration, and it creates a richer culture and environment for our families and our kids.
Yeah, Representative Rosenthal, one of the progressive policies or proposals that you brought up was undoing the law passed in 2015 in Texas that makes it illegal for local jurisdictions to have source of income discrimination bans, or what we like to say, thanks to Demetria McCain at Inclusive Communities Project, voucher discrimination. You brought that bill up in the previous session in 2019. It did not get a hearing, and it did get a hearing this time. What does that tell you?
To be perfectly candid, I think it tells me more about the chair of that committee who allowed the hearing than anything else, because we could not get it moved through the committee. But I was grateful to have the bill heard, and if the whole push is to remove voucher discrimination, affordable housing, I'm willing to do that any way that by any means that we can address. So legislatively, to try to remove the ban on a ban to make it so that it's not allowed to ban the source of income. It's only allowed for rental situations. So FHA, HUD doesn't allow it. FHA doesn't allow it for lenders that do government assisted business, which includes FHA first time loans. So it's just an area where I don't understand why it's allowed to stand, but apparently it's a strong lobby that prevents us from moving this forward.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that goes to the theme that both you and Senator Eckhart have brought up, and that's just giving renters the dignity and respect that that everyone else gets, property owners get. So I appreciate that you brought that bill up again. This is one of the major policy priorities of a lot of housing advocates and just general social justice and nonprofit service provider advocates. The Biden administration has brought up that there will be more vouchers that is in the plans, and it doesn't do a state any good if there continues to be widespread discrimination against voucher holders. So.
Absolutely right. Now, one of the arguments that they use is about the more complicated or increased amount of paperwork that they would have to do dealing with the government program. So if there are ways to streamline that, I have found in the past that removing excuses just brings new excuses. But that's one I think is worthwhile to try to streamline that process and not just make this sort of program more available, but also the other type of incentives and like down payment assistance programs for people buying first time houses. Those seem to be inordinately complicated and difficult to access. And so if government is going to provide assistance, anything we can do to make it more available and easier to access for the people who really need it would be a step in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. Senator Eckhart, I'm not sure if we lost you previously or if you just turned your video off, but if you're around, the question asked to you, I'll pose it again, is how do you see the Texas Legislature addressing homelessness issues in Austin, but across the state as well? Okay, we'll move on. Maybe there's some technical issues. It's not sure. Oh goodness. Okay. Well, I think there might be some technical issues going on over in the Eckhart household, but we can move on to just some questions about the sort of what are the hopes for future advocacy. We've talked about, these are the things we're working for. These are the things we want to see. But let's play a little game where we, close our eyes and envision the Texas, the beautiful tomorrow of Texas that we want to see, that gives renters the dignity and respect that they deserve. And maybe Senator Eckhart's back and we can pivot back to the homelessness question. 1 second. Senator Eckhart, are you there?
She's muted and she's also frozen. Okay, no longer frozen.
We can see you and hear you now.
Trying going outside. So what we have in Austin is a supply and demand issue because the supply is so contracted and the demand is so fierce. We're really struggling with having sufficient affordable housing. We have a large percentage of the population that are housing cost burdened, for which renting is really their only option, and we don't have enough units. And I will tell you, one of the issues that doesn't get talked about a lot is because the state of Texas is so reliant on property taxes. And our tax structure creates a circumstance where dirt becomes extremely valuable in urbanized areas, and it makes it very, very difficult to build affordable housing. So there's a a structural preference for building single-family dwellings and underutilizing the dirt so that you can sell really big houses for a lot of money, rather than maximizing that dirt for multifamily and rental units. So we've got a lot of work to do. The state's not helping us. The state is hindering us in great measure. And so really, I think that in the short term, we really need to be relying on the federal government and the localities for finding better ways to crack this nut, to increase our supply and nail that supply down as permanently affordable. And that's really where the work is, I believe. The state's not going to contribute toward it. All they're going to do is funnel the money, the federal money, through to the locals. And we just need to make sure that that's done well. I very much appreciate Representative Rosenthal's good work on making sure that those PFCs are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Public finance corporations should be nailing those properties down to permanent affordability instead of just aiding and abetting market rate rentals, which many of them do. I do see a need for that middle workforce housing. So in certain instances, I can see 80% MFI, but we really need to be seeing 60% MFI, 30% MFI, 30% MFI with 3 bedrooms. We've got a lot of work to do there in increasing that supply and then making it permanently affordable.
Yeah, the public facility corporation saga was never, it was a lot, and unfortunately there was no reform. So it's another thing in the column of we'll do this next session. So there's a lot of doom and gloom in our conversation, a lot of frustration with the politics of the state and the priorities of the state. But I do believe that there is value in envisioning a state of Texas that gives renters and low-income people the resources they need to thrive. And that's really the only way that the state of Texas will be a sustainable place. We can only grow so much. We can grow and grow and grow. And that's what is fueling the prosperity in the state. But there needs to be a long-term plan for helping all people thrive. And what I want to hear from you is, if you close your eyes and imagine the state of Texas as the thing that you want it to be, the place you want it to be, and you know, that there is integration, that there is enough housing, that there's abundance, and that we use that abundance well. I want you to imagine that, and then to think about how you think we get there. There are a lot of Texas housers folks. There are a lot of Sandys in Texas that are hungry to contribute to this housing advocacy if we just have a unified, strong vision. So tell me about your vision for this beautiful Texas of tomorrow, and tell me about how you think we get there. I will start with I'll start with Sandy, because I want to hear your vision.
Well, you've laid out some of it, obviously. You know, we need a state where everybody can live with dignity and respect, where there's enough affordable housing, where there's enough accessible housing, where there's enough decent housing, you know, so that people aren't teetering on the edge of eviction and homelessness, and where we're creating an ongoing underclass of people who can never, you know, live their best life. You know, they just, all their money's going to their landlord, and then they rely on the food bank. You know, they can't help stimulate the economy because they have no money to do it. And it's, you know, it's stressful, and there's ripple effects through society, you know. So I think we need to have a recognition that having people poorly housed, you know, homeless and teetering on the brink of homelessness constantly is not just bad for those individuals and those households and the children who are trying to go to school and the people trying to do their, hold down a job and perform and not be so stressed out that their health issues are triggered and they fall into depression and, put a burden on the health system. I mean, there's ripple effects, again, through society and not just, that poor family or, they have bad character and that's why they're in that situation. Some of the attitudes that policymakers and others who haven't found the will or desire to fix these problems might have. So we need to have that recognition that it's not just good for the individual households facing these problems, but it's good for all of us as a whole to have people who are happy and healthy and able to contribute and not living in fear of asking a landlord to remove the mold so that their children don't have asthma attacks. The landlord should be living in fear of, having mold grow. Also like to see people, not, living in cities where they're constantly being gentrified out of their communities. We need to have opportunities for people to stay in their communities where they want to stay, if they want to stay, and obviously also to have the ability to be mobile and not be redlined or shut out or discriminated against to where they want to move. And having more ownership, tenant ownership opportunities, I think is important. Not having these horrible eviction and that linger on people's records that block them from having the credit scores and ability to get into single family home ownership when they're ready. I mean, these are all things that need to be addressed. And so I think we've got to help explain to people who don't share this type of vision, on why it's important for everybody. And so we have to keep working on that.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Eckhart, it looks like you're in a stable place, so I'll move to you. Tell me about your vision and tell me about how you think we might get there.
Thanks. I think that we get there by working with the private sector and working with the public sector, as well as tenant advocates, to get us to a place where we have abundance of supply. Supply is going to be a big thing. And then we also have to work with the Texas Legislature to allow us to recognize ability to pay and property taxes. That's the way we keep communities from being gentrified, from giving us some flexibility within the property tax code to give people a break on their property taxes, commensurate with their ability to pay. Because when Mary inherits her home from her mom, who bought it for $30,000, and now the home is worth $1.5 million. Mary can't afford the property taxes on $1.5 million home in that area, and we need to recognize that in tax code. So I think by increasing supply, by working with the locals, we can figure this nut out. We've got to increase the supply, and we've got to have a tax code that recognizes people's ability to pay. Right now, we've got a serious problem there. We've got it hardwired. It's a systemic flaw. Makes it very, very difficult for people to build home and build community when they're having to move to chase the cheap rent all the time, when they're having to move to chase the cheap dirt, where they purchase a starter home, but then the area gentrifies and they can't afford the property taxes on that starter home, and they keep moving further and further out, even if they can afford to buy a home. Where are they going to be able to afford to buy a home? Is it going to be a 45-minute commute to their job? Is it going to be an hour-and-a-half commute to their job? When do we recognize that that's not good for community? And I think that that's my vision for the future. Just as Sandy was saying, when we recognize that stable communities, diverse communities, diverse in income level communities are really the most stable. And that's the vision I'm looking for. A day when we don't talk about gentrification any longer because a person who's in $1 million home recognizes the benefit of having a rental property next door where their kids' teachers live, where the paramedic who works in the fire department a few blocks over can afford to live. That we have truly integrated, economically integrated neighborhoods.
That sounds lovely.
But we'll have to work with our city councils as well, because zoning is a big part of that as well. We have serious zoning issues. We get a lot of NIMBY. I can't recall an instance where an affordable housing project was going in that the neighborhood didn't go berserk and say it was going to drag down their property values. And that happens whether it's in a hoity-toity neighborhood or whether it's in a lower income neighborhood. Everybody seems to not want an affordable multifamily project going in next door. And I'm hoping that we can get past that when we understand who's living there. It's your aunt and your uncle and your kid's teacher and maybe you someday. Probably some of the most powerful testimony I saw was from a housing developer who only did high-end single family out in the Lakeway area. And he testified that the zoning laws were becoming so restrictive that even in Lakeway, when this was amazing testimony, when a family got a divorce, the wife would no longer be able to afford to live in that neighborhood because she would have to sell the house that she got in the divorce because she could no longer afford it. And there would be no other housing stock for her to keep her children in the community in which they grew up, because the housing stock had become so homogeneously geared toward very, very wealthy people.
Yeah, that's not in line with the vision that you and Sandy have laid out at all. Representative Rosenthal, tell me about your vision and how you think we get there.
Okay, I will. First, I want to say what a total pleasure it is to be in this panel, included with you, fantastic women forwarding this positive vision. And I gotta say, I wish we could all go for coffee after this and talk about this on and on, especially Senator Eckhart. If there's one thing I'm looking forward to in this special session, it's getting to see more of you. So, and hopefully we can have more of these conversations. I could not agree more. I could not agree more with what you said about the supply side of this. And for me also, part of the decency of in having respectable, decent life is also your wages. With people, we're pushing for a $15 minimum wage. That's still not a livable wage. And so until it becomes predominant that families can afford to have a space to live on what they're making, we're going to continue having this problem. And it's the two parts of it, the affordability and availability of housing, but also the family incomes. And to me, that once you get this started, the grassroots feeding the economic engine from the bottom up is really what's been shown to work best. And when these families have the ability to move into stable neighborhoods, put their kids in decent schools, we want our public school system to be decent. It combats these systemic problems that we have with poverty in the nation and in our state. Poverty is a problem. Food insecurity is a problem, and mental health services, kind of all wraps in this stuff. Folks who are homeless, a lot of them, or in our jails, have problems with mental illness. Many of these, I would say a very high percentage of these people could be integrated in society if they had the type of help that they needed. And so for me, part of this whole thing starts with promoting decency of just having living wages and an affordable space to move into where you don't have to commute an hour. I mean, where we're at in Houston, in my part of Houston, we have no public transportation at all. So if you can't afford, to drive into town where your job probably is, you're just out of luck. And so all these things are connected. I mean, people talk about school to prison pipeline. This is part of it, where in our prisons, we should be focused on reintegration and retraining and rehabilitation instead of just the severe punishment and the stigma and the record that goes with all of that leads to very high recidivism rates for anyone who spent significant amount of time incarcerated, when in other places the models that work best promote the reintegration of these folks. And it's an economic engine, but it makes our communities more whole and more enriched. It promotes a monstrous economic engine. I mean, conservatives want to talk about the great economic miracle that Texas is. If you pay your working folks more, they'll spend money on everything. And it's the economic engine that drives this whole business. So my vision is to see it all happen. You need to have more housing that's affordable. You need to have families making the area median wage for a family should be enough to feed and house your family. And right now it's just not. So those are the goals for me that I feel like we should be working for.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. One of the things that drives the Texas Housers, first of all, I'm going to pause here, and for our audience watching on Facebook, now's your time to submit your questions so we can ask those. And I'm going to stall and tell you about Texas Housers because that's what I'm supposed to do as the deputy director. But so Texas Housers, one of the core tenets of the things we advocate is the idea of a beloved community as envisioned by Martin Luther King Jr. And that is that our fates are all wrapped together, that the collective fate of a community is dependent on our neighbor. So everything that you all talked about is just, it kind of drives home that point, as Sandy said, everything ripples out. Our fates are all bound together. And so we should treat policies like that our fates are all bound together, and we should treat our neighbors, and just policies is how we love our neighbors in this big sense. And then one other thing that I wanted to say about our advocacy agenda is Texas Housers advocates the 4 rights, and that's you've all already talked about it in some way, but we put it in this pithy phrase: the right to choose, the right to stay, the right to equal treatment, and the right to have a say. So the right to choose where you want to live, not dependent on your income, but the real choice, the right to stay in the face of impending development, the right to equal treatment by the government, so tenants not being treated different than homeowners, for example, and the right to have a say and understand that your government will listen to you. So I just wanted to indoctrinate everybody who's listening, and of course, Representative Rosenthal and Senator Eckhart. So now you use that and use it freely and widely. It was developed by some community leaders Texas Housers works with in Houston. We have a question, a comment from someone who says, my sister lives in Representative Rosenthal's district. They've been living there in a hotel there for over 2 years. And it's hard to get into housing right now, especially in the same school feeder patterns. So I just wanted to lift this woman's voice. And if you have any comments on that, Representative Rosenthal, you're free to give those.
I do. So I'm going to invite you to contact my office. And like, you can find me online through the Texas government website, or if you're on Facebook, just find me. I respond to direct messages and everything else, but I will try to find you some help. And one of the things that I've been focused on very heavily is these down payment assistance programs through our city and through our county. And right now they're massively underutilized. So if you fall within a certain income range, these programs are designed to help promote home ownership. And there are reasonably affordable areas in the district that I know it can be a challenge at first to get in, but sometimes just getting over that hump and getting into the house, these down payment assistance programs have been very helpful to a number of either constituents who have been here for a while or are just moving in. And if we can help you find assistance in that way, I would just love to do that. It's like the best part of this job that no one talks about when you're running for election is how you can help people in the real world in real time in their lives. So just contact my office and I, leave a number or whatever, I'll call you. We'll talk.
I don't see any other questions coming in. So before I let you go, and while we wait for maybe a few more questions from the audience, I wanted to, a good organizer, when they share space with elected officials, will always ask them for something. It's just the smart thing to do. So I will ask Representative Rosenthal, Senator Eckhart, what are some of the things that you might commit to in order to build, advocates and champions in the legislature? What can you commit to helping do that?
We have to win over Republican colleagues to some of these ideas. Otherwise, they don't pass. So we absolutely have to win them over. And that's difficult going, but we've got to find some middle ground to win over some of our Republican colleagues. When somebody is living in a hotel, and I've experienced it too with my constituency, folks who've been living in hotels for a long time, we need to get those, that's a huge expense. That is an investment that they're making that would be so much better in a down payment assistance program through the county. Travis County has one of those too that's hugely successful. I hope I'm still, yes, good. I'm still coming through. We really need to win over our Republican colleagues to say, listen, in our highly urbanized portions of the state of Texas, there's going to be a growing percentage of renters, and that's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing. It's every maturing city develops a larger percentage and a richer mix of renters. And that should be something we embrace rather than something that we resist. And to jump into that market and embrace it as a genuine and positive sign of maturity in our Texas cities.
Representative Rosenthal, what is your commitment for building a base among legislators, your legislative colleagues?
Well, first, I could not agree more with the good senator. We have to win the hearts and minds of our colleagues, really on both sides of the aisle, but it's conservatives, I believe, that should be buying into some of these more progressive policies, because they really will create very powerful economic engines. And if you're one of the conservative paradigms is driving the economy, driving profits and all that sort of thing, and there's space for that in these undertakings. It wouldn't hurt us to elect a couple of new progressives to show that that's what the people want. And you don't necessarily have to change the majority, but if the people are speaking in elections and it causes a ripple that, in my brief experience as a legislator, in the session where seats change hands, a lot more progressive policy seems possible. And in the session where no seats change hands, the status quo, or even going down the red meat path, and quite honestly, one side or the other you could say the same thing about either. If you want to promote balance, the way to do that is to show the competitiveness of these ideas and how compromise is required for success. And so I think we make an economic argument to our friends. I think also there's a political argument to be made at the ballot box where people express themselves. And when the message is strong, it's our job to respond to that as a legislature.
Yeah, very true. I think this question is mostly for Sandy, but also for just everybody on the panel. Some tenants are watching this and they say, I'm really excited about the visions that you all have. What can tenants do to build some energy in the interim and get some stuff moving to help make the vision happen? Sandy, you're an expert in this, so I'll let you start. And if our elected officials here, they can follow afterward. You might be on mute, Sandy.
I'm already, I'm unmuted, right? No, I'm muted. Okay.
You're good.
I'm unmuted. Okay, sorry about that. You know, I really think it's important for tenants to reach out to their elected officials, particularly state senators and state reps that deal with tenant landlord law. I mean, there's a role for the federal government to play and that they've been playing, especially since COVID, as well as city councils, but they need to understand what their constituents go through. I'd say, you know, probably most of the people in the legislatures are not, you know, full-time renters. You know, most of them are already homeowners, and some of them might, you know, even work in the industry. But they need to hear the stories of people who are being priced out, who are struggling to stay housed, who are hit with, you know, a never-ending list of fees and fines that landlords tack on to rent. You know, that don't have the opportunity to cure a default, that have their security deposits ripped off, and then not only that, then get reported to credit bureaus and screening services on the basis of some manager saying you owe this with no due process, you know, when that stuff gets reported. And so, I mean, there's a long list of horror stories, but I've seen, you know, many legislators when they're laying out a bill say, you know, I decided to file this because a constituent came to me and told me this. And so more of those stories need to be told. I think, you know, being registered to vote, staying registered to vote, registering your neighbors and family members to vote, and making sure they understand the connection between going to the polls and voting and, you know, the quality of your life. And so, you know, a lot of people, you know, they might vote every 4 years for the presidential, but they don't really understand the roles necessarily of the you know, the down ballot offices and what impact it has on people's lives. And so paying attention to the down ballot races. And, you know, there's voter guides, and when people are campaigning, they're usually happy to talk to you. So, you know, figuring out where they stand on these issues, and again, making sure they know your story, and that you know, and ask them directly, you know, would you support a law that did this? Would you introduce a bill that did that? You know, we need your help. So, and, you know, and being organized with your neighbors to work together on these things.
Yeah.
I want to put in a plug for joining. Join whatever neighborhood association you have. Join the PTA of the school that your kids go to. Join whatever organizing groups feel right to you, that give you a sense of place and a tribe from which to advocate, because this stuff is hard to do by yourself. And it's nice to be able to share the burden and pass the baton back and forth. So if you can get it, if there is a neighborhood association, join it. If there's not, see if you can create one. See if you know, go to the Boy Scouts meeting and see if that crowd is interested in starting a neighborhood association. There's strength in numbers. At the council, there's strength in numbers. At your county commissioner's court, there's strength in numbers. And there's definitely strength in numbers if you're going to be advocating the legislature, because you can have an organization behind you and you can say, yeah, we're all renters. We have a neighborhood association that's, you know, a 10-block radius. And yeah, we invite the landlords to the neighborhood association and we tell them what we think. And we tell them the problems that we're having. And we talk about the fact that if I'm chasing a cheap rent, I have to move my kid to a different school just because I'm chasing the cheap rent, how disruptive that is in my family life. So join things. Join things and find like-minded people who will share the burden of advocacy with you, the joy and the burden of it.
Well said. Representative Rosenthal, you'll have the last word.
Very well said. I couldn't agree more with what Senator Eckhart was just saying. And also, you know, so I'll just frame this by saying I'm really an engineer from the oil and gas industry. I comically refer to myself as an out of work engineer right now because I kind of am. But how I got started in politics was after the 2016 election. I was so alarmed. And in my industry, it was difficult for me to find people to talk to. I started a Facebook group that was really intended to be a moral support group for people who are like-minded like me. And then I heard about Indivisible. We named it an Indivisible group, and suddenly within a few weeks, we had hundreds of members. I say this because if you join anything, whether it's the Boy Scouts, we have a very strong League of Women Voters in our area. There's numerous advocacy groups. Even if it's just a block party on your block, you know, meet some neighbors, you can invite me. I'm easy to find. I'll come out and talk with you all. Well, we can have community events. We can organize our different groups, no matter who you're affiliated or for what reason. You know, if you're in my area, you're probably 70% chance you're an animal lover. I'm a big time animal lover. We got a house full of rescue dogs. But no matter what it is that you want to advocate for, I will personally come. I'll meet with you. I'll help you organize. If my presence helps you bring people, all the better. We can meet at local businesses. If you're out in your neighborhood, we can find ways to do this. So we can be working together to create this advocacy, and I can help you and you can help me to help you. So I definitely hope that that we can get a wave of this moving. I'm down for it.
Yeah, good deal. Well, I'd like to thank the panel today for joining and talking about all of these issues. It sounds like mostly we're on the same page, and hopefully in the interim, we can come up with some great ideas together. So thank you for joining. Thank you for the work you all do. And with that, let's go get some more work done. All right, take care.